Hey guys, today we're talking with Caleb Hoover. The foundation of this video is a music video I shot on Anamorphic, and I'm having Caleb kind of come in, give me his thoughts, critiques, and then just going into a longer form discussion on Lumix Cameras, the state of Anamorphic in 2024, and many more things. So stay around, check out the conversation, check out the shorter standalone video on my channel, and also definitely check out the official music video for which I was the director of photography. But anyway, let's go in, jump right in with Caleb and the live reaction to this music video and this greater discussion on this episode of Micro 4 Talks. Yeah, I think it's time to get right into it. Let's go into this. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and don't hold back. I want the critiques because, you know, if we don't get those critiques, we don't get better, right? So.
All right. Hey, well, I even like this first frame sitting here right here. Oh, this is great. I like the halation.
Oh, you noticed, right? Yep. We got a film convert. Not sponsored, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, you're not using any diffusion filters or anything? Is that all post?
It is all post. I get a little worried sometimes with the diffusion. And these lenses are weird enough that I didn't want to push it too hard.
Yep. Looks like you're really pushing the color grade, too. I like that.
Yes. Shot in Vlog, and I wanted a vibrant kind of, especially with just all the amazing set direction. It was easy to really push some of those colors.
There's some flares right there, like that.
I had to find at least one set where I could get some flares in.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point?
See, this is the thing I love about Anamorphic, is just kind of the imperfections that you get with the shot. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Just a little bit of like, it's off just enough that it's like beautiful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that was
like
my thing.
I'm not saying that the shot is bad. It's like just those little imperfections. I absolutely love that about Anamorphic.
Yeah, and that's why I did, for better or for worse, opt to shoot almost all of this wide open at T2 and T2.4, I believe it was, depending on the lens. But
I think I can definitely tell that it was shot wide open. Well, first of all, I mean, there's some pretty dark scenes in there, but I feel like I can see just a little bit of, like, I don't know if it's chromatic aberration or just a little bit of fuzziness, you know, around the edges, which I actually really like that.
Yes, these lenses definitely had a little bit of that soft corner vibe for sure. Yeah, definitely not the most perfect lenses ever. It definitely makes focus a little tricky sometimes where you're like, is this sharp? But
now, were you pulling focus as well? Or was there like a separate focus puller?
It depended on the shot. It depended on the day. But gotcha. Yeah, I had a first AC, and they were pulling focus a lot for me. Nice. Their name's Jade, and they were really great. But then, like, especially the moving shots and the gimbal, I actually was not smart enough to figure out how to pull focus with the gimbal I had available to me. So
that's tough.
That was all me, which, especially for a shot coming up here, was incredibly difficult. Yeah. You'll know it. It's a very long shot, and it's actually coming up right here.
Okay. Oh yeah, and you're doing like a little bit of a tilt up.
Yep, the slow motion gimbal dolly shot while pulling focus, definitely. I thought that was gonna be. It was the hardest probably shot. This one of the whole thing.
Were you going down the steps as well?
Down the steps, backwards, pulling focus in slow motion. Just to make it, you can't make it too easy on yourself, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I love this shot. Love it. Yeah, those flares are hitting.
And they actually helped so much with the effects, you know?
Yeah.
Because I would have had to add those in and try to replicate it. And then you just get it for real, and it just ties it all together. And now we just got the credits.
Love it. Were we going through the credits too?
No, nice. But yeah. So there you go. That's the video. You're in my head. Susie McCollum.
Love it.
And it's out now for anyone wanting to check it out. So you definitely should.
Sweet. I saw your name just pop up on the screen right there.
Oh,
written by. Love it.
A little bit. I might have something to do with it. But yeah, that was the video. I want to hear your thoughts on like the style and anything else that you were thinking of. I know we got a lot of it in the live reaction, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the shots go, I thought they were like right on point. Now, I'm not a big anamorphic shooter myself, right? I'm doing a lot of more like corporate, kind of more clean corporate style looking things,
right?
A lot of interviews, that type of thing. And not a lot of it is anamorphic, but from my experience with anamorphic, just the shots that you had set up here, I thought were awesome. Like with the way you're using lighting, some of the stuff that was done in post was, I love the halation feel with it. I love kind of the vintage feel with it. And I don't know if some of that was with the lenses that you were using as well, which I have some questions about with the lenses that you were using, or, if most of that was happening in post. But, one of the things I said during the video is I just love, some of the like imperfections that happen with anamorphic, whether that's just like, maybe it's the focus is off just a little bit, or maybe it's some like chromatic aberration or whatever the case is with anamorphic lenses. That's what I love about those, using them. So what was it like from your perspective shooting this anamorphic?
Well, I guess I was just glad that they let me do it, because that's always a discussion you have to have when it's like, hey, is it worth it to like rent these lenses and go this whole way? And just, I guess to get it out the way, we won't save it as a mystery. I shot on the Vazen anamorphic lenses. Okay. I believe you've tested out at least one of them, correct? Yeah,
for a micro Four Thirds.
Yes.
It was, what was the focal length? I don't even remember the focal length.
It was the wide one, right? It was a 28 maybe?
Yeah, it was a little bit wider. Yeah. And that was such a great lens.
Yeah.
Testing that one out. I wish I could have kept that one, because that one is like, I like that one more than some of the Sirui anamorphic lenses. The Sirius are a little bit more like, I don't know, more of a modern look, cleaner look. Yeah. Those Vazen ones they're beautiful lenses.
Yeah, and I guess if you were shooting like corporate and needed anamorphic, maybe the Sirui would be a good way to go, because they are a little bit more clean for sure, which I think there is a space for clean anamorphic lenses out there.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But these Vazen lenses are just, especially that 28, that any shot on the gimbal or really moving at all was that 28, because it was relatively small. And then there's a 40 millimeter, which I opted out of renting just because there's a 65, which was a lot different than the 28, and I thought we would get more diverse looks from it to some level.
Absolutely.
So those are our two lenses, and so it's kind of weird because they are mismatched in size and aperture and stuff, but the size difference was an advantage too for the gimbal, like I said. Yeah. One
of the things I like about those Vazen lenses, they're the flare. I like the flares a little bit more on them as well, compared to the Sirui. And don't get me wrong, the Sirui anamorphic lenses are fantastic. But if you're looking for like just little quirkiness things, like little quirks about the lenses, those Vazen lenses really offer that aspect to your anamorphic shot. And I think that comes across in this video as well too.
Yeah, I really was glad I was able to like take full advantage of them and actually have them add a lot to the look of it. And right away, this kind of vintage kind of aesthetic was like emphasized in some of the early meetings and stuff. So I was like, okay, I could go really far. I don't know if you're familiar with like the SLR Magic anamorphics. They were like, the back in the day only good option.
Yeah.
Those are like a little too rough for me. So these Vazens felt like a better middle ground. Do you know that Vazen's actually has stopped production? Did you know that?
No way. I did not know that.
I think I remember reaching out to them about collaborating with this video or the music video, and like 2 weeks later it was like, sorry guys, we're closing down all production. And so it's tough, man. It's tough out here. It's so competitive. I get it, but
yeah, it totally is. And I think a lot of that comes with the Sirui anamorphic lenses. Like I think a lot of people see those and just like almost automatically just go with them because they're all over the place, right? I mean, you see those more often on YouTube and people using them on YouTube than you do those Vazen lenses. So unfortunately, that sucks.
Yeah, I would love to talk to some more people about like what happened exactly, or maybe do some research on like where they might have gone wrong. But yeah, Siri definitely, they're bringing the competition and they're very competitive with the pricing and things like that. So I guess everybody pour one out for Vazen, and if you really want these lenses, like there's only so many out there. So but yeah, so
now,
I guess...
Now, did you review these lenses at all? Did you do anything, like any type of review or anything?
Subscribe to find out. But no, I haven't yet because most of the footage with them is this video, of course. So
gotcha. Yep.
I wanted to be able to use that in the review. So maybe in the coming weeks or months, I'll get around to reviewing them. They really are fantastic lenses. And even just the 2-lens kit, you could see, I think we did quite a bit. And yeah, it was really nice. And of course, shooting on Lumix really helped make those lenses shine as well, just because there's so many built-in tools and features for Lumix to shoot anamorphic, which I guess is maybe the next thing we can jump into a little bit. So in your testing with anamorphic, like what has been the tools with Lumix specifically that have kind of enabled you to shoot with those lenses better?
Yeah, I mean, well, First of all, I mean, just the open gate settings that you have, right? Yeah. I mean, whether you're shooting on a GH6, shooting on a GH7, shooting on a S5 II X, shooting on the S9, right? Like
which is crazy.
You have these open gate settings, which just allows for, I don't want to say better, but like more flexible anamorphic shooting. You know what I mean? So, and then on top of that, you have all of those like de-squeeze settings, right? So you can actually just like squeeze it right in there and get that shot and like see what it looks like. But then on top of that, you have the stabilization. So if you do want to go some handheld modes, like shoot handheld with anamorphic, I mean, you do have that image stabilization in those anamorphic settings that you can use. And I mean, for anamorphic shooters, like Lumix cameras really are, and like I'm not sitting here saying, Lumix everything. I mean, even though my channel is kind of about that, but it's like you really do have all these benefits for shooting anamorphic with these Lumix cameras. It's pretty incredible, honestly.
And I don't think literally anybody but Lumix does the anamorphic stabilization.
I don't, not that I know of. I mean, some of the cinema cameras, you don't have any stabilization.
Right, which is like, if you're a real pro, you do that, right? But
yeah, and so that would probably be like that next step that people would be shooting anamorphic with are some of these cinema cameras.
Yes.
Just for more like film, like, filmmaking and short films, long films, whatever, feature films. But the fact that you have that stabilization, de-squeeze, and open gate in these consumer cameras from Lumix are honestly, for the price point, is absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And I guess we'll get into a little bit maybe the specific camera I chose, which grand reveal. We know it's Micro Four Thirds, but I wanted to shoot it all on the GH6. The GH7 wasn't out yet. But I think the lenses came first and the camera came second. But also full frame anamorphic lenses are known to be a little pricey, so I was like, all right. And then I actually shot the B camera on like the second and third day especially. I realized like switching my GH6 out of the gimbal into the tripod cage setup was really tough. And so at that point forward, basically all of the 28mm shots were actually on the GH5S.
Yeah, let's go.
The 65 close-ups were on the GH6. Throw a little cine match in there. But I was surprised at how good
it's a great setup.
Yeah, the GH5S holds up really, really well.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little bit lower resolution, of course, but we're mastering at 4K anyway, so more than enough. And it's actually got a slightly bigger Micro Four Thirds sensor for people who don't know. So
Yeah.
You actually got a little bit wider on the wide angle lens on the Anamorphic, so I was like, I'll
Just
take whatever I can
bit.
get, you know?
Yeah, totally.
But the GH6 is a great camera. Have you used the full frame S5 2X or anything like that on Anamorphic yet?
Yeah, so I've used I've used one of the Siri. I should have brought it out here actually. I have it in my gear closet back here, but I have the Siri 35. This is going to be bad. This is going to be bad for me to do in this video, but I'm going to go get that lens.
Go for it.
Okay?
Go for it.
I'll be right back.
Do it.
You can watch me walk away. Here we go.
I play the Jeopardy music, but I'd get copyright striked.
All right, so this is the full frame from Siri. It's the 35 T 2.9, and this is an L mount lens. So right here, I've got the S5 2X, and so I do have a video on my channel about this lens. You know, it's a great lens.
Right.
It was not my favorite. I wish it was just maybe a little bit faster. The D-Squeeze, what's a 1.5, I believe? 1.6,
Okay.
but it's a 1.5 squeeze on the S5 2X. So it's off just a little bit from kind of where you need to be for the lens. It's not super noticeable, but you might notice it just a little bit. And so that's one of the things, you know, if Lumix can, like they have a ton of like D-Squeeze features, right? If there's just maybe a couple more that they could add through a firmware update or something, would be even the ideal situation there too. But
don't quite have all of them yet. Yeah, unfortunately.
This is a amber flare one too. It's not the blue flare. So I kind of like that over more of a sci-fi look. I kind of like more of the natural flare coloring with that over some of the you know, sci-fi looking stuff with that blue flare. But so I mean, I've used this a little. Yeah,
the blue can be a little too much depending. But I've always, I guess, I have two questions, I guess, of like, you want to hear your experience. Like, and the first would be just, was there a notable difference, I guess, with the full frame versus micro four thirds for anamorphic shooting? Do you think one is better than the other one? Or does it just depend on like what you've got and is it a personal thing, do you think?
You know, to be honest with you, like I really liked shooting anamorphic with that GH6 in Vazen setup. I almost liked it a little bit more than shooting full frame. I don't know if I can necessarily pinpoint like what it is about it. And maybe it was the lens camera combo, you know, maybe it was like a little bit more of a vintage feel lens to it that I liked a little bit more. It's a little bit more gritty, you know, on the GH6, where it's like, you know, if you're getting some more grain or something with some lower light. Maybe that's it. I'm not totally sure, but I did like, and I have not used the GH7 with any type of anamorphic shooting. It might be kind of fun to test that out a little bit as well. And see if there's any difference. I don't think there's going to be a big difference with the GH7 compared to the GH6, honestly, for anamorphic shooting. I don't think there's going to be a huge difference. But I had like, if we're just sitting here talking about like the fun factor, I would say shooting with the Vazen GH6 combo was more fun than shooting with this.
Gotcha.
With the Siri S5 2X combo.
And I think
take that for what it's worth.
Right, yeah, very, very not the most scientific, but like, hey, if you're going for like perfect results, like anamorphic's not the playground you want to be playing in anyway, more than likely. But I the stretch factor and like the character are kind of, they seem to be connected in some way, you know, where like the more the stretch factor, the weirder the lens gets, like going all the way up to 2 times anamorphic. I don't know if you would ever want to go past that, but you can go all the way down to, with some of these adapters, like 1.25, 1.33. Is there like a sweet spot for you, or is it like the more is the better? Because for me, I'm like, if I'm shooting anamorphic, I might as well shoot the most anamorphic looking thing you've ever seen, right? But
because that Vazen was like a 1.3, right? Well, like 1.33. Was that where that was at?
No, it's a 1.8.
I can't remember. Oh, is it a 1.8? Okay.
Yeah. I had to refresh myself before this. So.
Yeah. I was like, oh shoot, I'm trying to think back on that video when I when I made it.
Yeah,
I think that might have been a couple years ago.
Just a few years ago, no big deal.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, honestly, like I don't know if I'm in the anamorphic world enough to be like, oh,
right.
this is where I got to be for these types of shots or anything like that. You know, I will say, like, I do kind of like the factor, like the 1.5, 1.6 factor in there. I mean,
yeah.
I thought that was kind of nice, you know, but that's not like necessarily a scientific reasoning. It's just kind of, I like the appeal. I like the look of it, you know. I don't think you need to go like super thin on that. But having, you know, probably that 1.5 to 1.8 range, I think is pretty pleasing to the eye, honestly. And like what you have in this video, like that looks great. You know what I mean?
And yeah, I just love what things do. Like if something goes wrong with anamorphic, it's like, it always feels beautiful to me, you know, like, oh, the bokeh is like a diamond or like a weird shape, or like the flare turned into a rainbow. I'm like, it's all, I'm here for all of it, you know, and that's what I'm looking for. So
like any of those little characters, you know, and that's what's so beautiful about the lenses. Like, I mean, we can talk about cameras and camera specs all day long. Like that's great. But what it really comes down to are some of the lenses that you're using and getting the look that you want with these lenses. Like honestly, for most of the corporate work I do, like 24 to 70 is absolutely perfect, right? Like I don't need some of it. Like I'm shooting open gate for vertical anyway, and you know, then those horizontal cuts. Like I'm not going to be shooting anamorphic for some of those corporate shoots that I'm doing. So like a 24 to 70 is absolutely perfect, or some of these like primes that I'm using, you know, like those are fantastic. But if you want a little bit more character to your film, your music video, whatever that might be, like that's where these lenses really come in. And I know, like I'm preaching to the choir, right? Like everybody knows that for the most part. So it's like, if you want those little quirks, like invest in those lenses to get that look that you want. Like you want a vintage look, these Vazen ones are awesome.
Yeah, and that was really that's kind of my hierarchy. I always tell people of like going into productions, especially like where you may need to rent gear and you may have some gear already. It's like lighting. You can make pretty much any lens and camera look good with good lighting. Oh yeah, totally. And you can pretty much make any good camera or any camera look good with a good lighting and a good lens. And so it's like, I've got the GH6. It's incredible. Sure, we could rent the camera and do all this, but let's rent the lenses and get the most out of this camera that we can. And if I didn't need the GH6 for that one slow motion shot, I could have done the whole video on the GH5S. The problem is there's no 10-bit open gate on that camera. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, you know, let's forget about getting a big cinema package or something crazy and just use a lot of the tools we have at our disposal. Let's bring on my lighting tech guy, because this stuff wouldn't look nearly half as good, especially the effect shots without correct lighting. Like that fire, I was like, if we can make the interaction of the light on the actors look right, then I can put in the fire and that will look fine. Totally. You know, but if that I think lighting
in this video that, you know, that we watched, like that's very evident that the lighting was on point, you know, and I think the lighting was very purposeful as well, like with trying to get some of those flares in there, some of the backlighting, you know, those types of things. Like I can tell that it was all very purposeful. You know, and you're not just relying on like the sun or anything like that for like natural light and all that. You're like took a lot of care in that lighting piece, and that comes through, and that helps with that anamorphic look as well, depending on some of those shots, right?
Yeah, everything really was like servicing that look and like tying everything together, you know, like, I'll just use like, you know, we've got a shot, we've got a house on fire, you know, we've got 300-watt lights blasting out of every window and door, hitting the actors, lighting up the inside of the house, and even flickering a little bit because all the lights had some kind of like candle flicker or whatever. And so we're getting lens flares, natural lens flares that are not being added in, so they're not like digital looking.
Yeah.
That are actually changing subtly in exposure and flickering themselves. And then the lights are just covered up by the fire, and then you put on film convert, which adds a little grain and a little halation and just smooths out anything that's not left. Like it all, without the lens and the plugins and everything, it doesn't quite work as well. And so the lenses actually weren't just a stylistic choice. It really actually did help just tie those different elements together throughout the piece for me. So
that's cool.
I'm glad it ended up being as worth it as I hoped it would, because that's always the trick, right? You're like, oh, I hope this is worth it, but I think we got
work
there.
on this. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. How do you feel about the color grade? Do you like the like poppy color kind of vibe a lot, like the Mad Max Fury Road of it all, or
yeah, I thought for this video, I thought that fit great, and like I could tell that you really pushed it, you know, like really went heavy on the color, maybe some saturation and that type of thing, and like the way that it comes across in the video, I thought it played very well with just a lot of the colors that you had in the video too, right? Like you had a lot of brighter colors, you know, if you go back and in this video and you're like overlaying some of the shots that we just watched, you know, like there's a lot of color with like the birthday cake and, you know, and things like, or whatever the cake was, you know, that scene, a lot of colors going on, and just having those pop in this type of video and pushing those colors, I think it just kind of adds to that aesthetic. And it's almost like, I don't know if you were totally going for a vintage feel with it, but like it really does have kind of that vintage feel and those like that pop of color. Like I don't know, to me that just kind of came across that way, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's tough because like, yeah, you want like a filmic vintage feel, but you don't want it to be like a caricature of like that, or like to look retro. Like the vintage retro slider it's a fine line, right? But like we didn't want it to look like, I don't know, it's a tough balance, but I think we all ended up pretty happy with it. You know, we didn't go like full vintage, because then we would have just used like hard lights with no modifiers for the whole thing, you know, which is really tough to do and make look good. So I think I'm glad you think we struck a good balance, because that is kind of what the assignment was.
And this says a lot too about like that vlog color too, right? But that you can really push it. You know, you can really do a lot with that vlog.
Even on the small sensors.
I think that's evident. Yeah, I think that's evident with this, you know.
Yeah, I think even the GH6, like I said, with the Micro Four Thirds sensor, and even the open gate modes, they are only 420, I believe.
420, yep.
And I still was able to push that, as we saw, the color pretty far without it really breaking, which I was always worried, because I have had the GH6 specifically break a couple times up, depending on the situation. Rarely, but it has happened. But I really was impressed. And even the GH5S, like there was a little dynamic range missing on that camera compared to the GH6 and 7, and especially compared to the full frame. But it's still a really solid camera, and it was actually kind of nice, because I was shooting like 2,000 on this GH6 and then like 2,500 on the GH5S, so it wasn't as off as possible as it could have been. So it was easier for my lighting guy. Although trying to tell my lighting guy that we're shooting at like T2 at 2,000 ISO, he's like, why? And I'm like, well, there's this thing called dynamic range boost, right? And he's like, all right, I'll just do it. So shout out to Beck for putting up with my crazy like Lumix setup. So although you don't need
I do have a question. I do have a question. So on the GH6, one of the big issues with the GH6, right, is the streaking.
Sure.
You know, the light streaking. Did you notice any of that, especially with like those candles? Or some of the backlight? Did you notice that with the anamorphic shooting? Did you notice those streaking issues that a lot of people have with the GH6?
No.
Yeah.
Not really at all. I mean, I've noticed it in a few situations, but
Yeah.
really early on, I did a pretty deep dive testing in on like, okay, what are the bad ISOs for the streaking, right?
Yeah. Right.
And that 2000 ISO with the dynamic range boost on is about the safest you're going to get on that camera in my experience. And so I'm like, okay, that's going to be perfect. And then, I mean, honestly, maybe if it was there, it got covered up by flares, who knows? But
right.
I've shot a lot of stuff. I mean, I shot a noir kind of feature film a few, 2 summers ago. And there was only 2 shots that I noticed afterwards that the streaking was like kind of prevalent, and it was like always like a street lamp and like a black night sky behind it. I still don't know if there was just some sample variation, you know, because some cameras seem to be better than others on the GH6, like different model or copies. But I've rarely experienced it in a way that I couldn't control for it or like adjust something slightly. But it is nice that it's fixed on the GH7.
And I don't know if it's something too where people, you know, they see it maybe on YouTube or something and then just assume that's on like every shot that you're going to get. You know what I mean? Like I have experienced it with the GH6, but I've not experienced like to the point where I can't necessarily use a certain shot or something. Like sometimes I can crop in and get rid of it or whatever, you know, like different ways of kind of overcoming that. But like I have experienced it, but I don't know necessarily if it was as big of an issue as some people were making. I don't know, like from your perspective, just that streaking issue with, especially anamorphic. Like, I mean, I feel like it would really show up being stretched out like that if there was that streaking issue. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, or you could always take the optimist approach, and I always hear people like saying like, hey, it's just free anamorphic lens flares if you know, so I'm like, totally. Nah, not really, but
yeah, I mean, it's a stretch.
It's actually, no pun intended, or maybe it was. Yeah, I never had a big problem with it personally, and I was someone who tested it a lot, so maybe people think I did have an issue with it, but like, I don't think a shot has ever been ruined in the entirety of me shooting with the GH6 by that issue. And there's only one shot I can ever think of that really was like me shocked that it was happening in a certain situation. And it was just like we're on a stage and the guy's wearing a yellow shirt. And then I looked off to the side of the stage and it was just like the worst streaking you've ever seen. And I'm like, why is this happening? It's bright. There's no contrast. It's just a guy in a yellow shirt. What's like, but I was really surprised, like shooting like a really high key lighting, backlit everything, street lamps, like noir or like this project, that I really didn't see it. And so, and especially after grading too. I really like, if you're looking at your raw vlog and you see it, like, that's where it's going to show up. If you grade it and expose properly for the most part, I have found pretty little issues with it. So yeah. That's the long answer, but short answer, not really. Although I did have a few other issues shooting anamorphic just in general, and I guess depending on how you use these, more minimalist or maximalist or anything in between, you might have run into. Did you run into any like struggles shooting like anamorphic with the Lumix cameras and whether it was full frame or the crop?
Yeah, I mean, probably just like matching up the squeeze factor, like with especially the S5 2X, you know, that's just a little bit of an issue. I mean, it's easily overcome, right? But it's just off a little bit. But I would say probably that would be my biggest issue. I mean, honestly, like pulling focus is an issue that that I have with anamorphic. It's just a little bit more difficult, but that's something that can be overcome, you know, with bigger monitor or, you know, having a focus pooler, that type of thing. Right. But, you know, when it comes down to it, I mean, like, I guess another thing too, if you don't have the stabilization right, it might be a little wonky, like a little warpy or something too. So, I mean, just kind of making sure like your settings are really dialed in. I think is the biggest thing when it comes down to it. You know
There's
what I mean?
definitely a learning curve there, because you're like,
yeah.
And you also have to figure out, like, I'm shooting differently, I'm pulling focus differently, I'm even framing differently because my aspect ratio is different. It is a bit of a, it's not an easy transition necessarily if you've never worked with it before. And a lot of my struggles actually came with just like the outputting of the signal, because with this production, I was like, okay, I've got a focus puller for a good amount of the time. They need a signal. And then the focus puller's monitor was also sending signal out wirelessly to all these other people. And so the first issue was like the HDMI delay on some of these cameras was definitely a little, and like the GH6 is not among the better cameras for that, even with audio turned off. So that was kind of the first thing. And then I actually could not get my monitors to really play with the 4x3 signal coming out of the cameras very nicely.
Interesting.
Pretty much all of them would just crop in the video into the very middle center of the monitor. And this is probably more of a monitor thing or an HDMI standard thing than like a Lumix thing. But the only monitor and the only setting that worked to get a full screen image on the monitor was the Atomos stuff. And those only worked at 2x squeeze. Because if I put it to 1.8, it would still crop again. So
interesting.
It was really weird, and I need to. And I've heard a few people talk about this on some forums. I need to follow up more with some people, maybe with Sean and some of these monitor manufacturers. But it was really interesting for sure. And so I ended up making it work with the Atomos, and 2x squeeze close enough to 1.8. It kind of worked. But it was a little bit of a hurdle because that I didn't expect to have to deal with, because I'm like, I got all these monitors, I can use whatever. And But yeah, having like a 50% shrunk down image as a focus puller, it was that was a tall order.
Totally.
So that was an interesting issue. And then I think we would just love to see in like a GH8 or an S1 H Mark II or whatever might be coming down the pipeline, some more,
whatever that might be.
In the next 2 months to 2 years, hopefully. But I think we all want to see like more open gate frame rates, because I think anything over 30 is going to give you a crop, even on the GH6 on the smaller sensors, which you'd think would be easier, right? But there's still a crop there. So that definitely made like that slow motion walking scene a little tricky, because it was tighter than maybe you would otherwise choose to do. But that would be, I think, the final frontier of open gate recording for Lumix, is just getting up to 48, 60 frames.
I would say 48 or 48 and 60. You don't need to go 120 on open gate. You don't need it. But having a 48 option and a 60 option, I totally agree. Yeah.
Because I guess I should have explained the shot more, but the shot where she's walking down the stairs, like, we had to shoot in 48 frames because we wanted her still singing, but the people sort of running in slow motion. And so that's a speed up the song ×2, have her sing twice as fast. And then 48 to 24 is like a perfect, and it lines up perfectly. You'll see that all, if you guys out there haven't seen, like, heard of that effect in music videos, like, watch the music videos, you'll see it all over the place. So, but yeah, it was a little tricky. And also, when you crop in on a sensor like that, the noise does get a little bit worse. So you're shooting crop sensor, 2000 ISO, cropped in 1.4 extra times. That shot had a little denoising on it. We'll just say it. We'll just say that.
Yeah. Hey, that works, right?
Yeah.
That's what post is for.
Exactly. That was a long shot to do denoisy for sure. I was like, oh man, this is like a
little processing power.
30-second shot. Yeah, my 2019 MacBook is really struggling. Man, I need to get on the M1s.
Fan was running.
Yeah, the fan never doesn't run anymore at this point. Let's be honest.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah, as good as Lumix is, and I think they are probably the best for anamorphic, could always be better. So
we'll
100%.
See. Have you tried that like the DJI like LiDAR system with an anamorphic lens yet?
I have not, but I can only imagine. Have you?
I'd be interested. No, I haven't. But I would be interested in like, oh, how would that work? You know, what does that look like? You know, honestly, you know, having that option, like I might be more prone to like start tossing on anamorphic lenses and just like going out and shooting, you know, and not having to worry about some of those little things like, you know, making sure everything's in focus and focus pulling and all that type of thing.
And that would work too with focus pulling as well, because they have a really great and like basically instant wireless system as well, I think, for like monitoring and things like that. So I'm like, dude, that would be, you know, that's basically your autofocus and your focus puller in one, depending on what shoot you're going on. So that would be...
It'd be interesting. I don't know.
DJI, send that to Caleb. We need to see it. The people need to know how good it is.
The people need to know. I'm sure there's like a ton of videos about that already. I just haven't watched them.
Hey, but with anamorphic specifically,
I don't know. I might have to do a little YouTube search later.
Yeah, I think we both will. And I guess the last kind of thing I wanted to talk about a little bit with you is just like, and I think this applies to all types of work, not just music videos, but, you know, in today's age of like hyper vertical content being pushed everywhere and this multi-format, multimedia, all this stuff, like, I guess, where do you see like the place of anamorphic in this day and age? And is that a decision that can be made? I mean, it was never a decision to be made lightly, I feel like, for a project.
Yep.
But especially now, it's, you know, how much do you gain versus lose choosing anamorphic? And like, I guess, what do you think of like, where's the future of anamorphic in the age of vertical video, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You know, like I don't see it unless they're like stacked images on a vertical format, you know, like, which is definitely doable, but you're still probably not going to get it like super wide. But, yeah, I don't know. Like, it might be some lifestyle type brands that would be going for that type of look and things. But I mean, a lot of what I see right now is just quick turnaround stuff. And I feel like for quick turnaround, you know, vertical social content, like people aren't going to do a whole lot of like anamorphic setups for that type of thing, you know? So I don't know if it would be more in this realm of like music videos, films, short films, like real creative work like that. Yeah. And like I said, there might be a place in some more lifestyle brands, just kind of having that aesthetic a little bit. And I don't know if you'd want to like have vertical flares if you're like turning the camera vertical like this to shoot like vertical flares like that. But
I mean, it's certainly a vibe. I don't know if it's a vibe.
It is a vibe. I don't know if I necessarily love it, but yeah. I mean, that's a good question, honestly. Like, where does anamorphic play in that realm of quick turnaround content? You know, it's tough.
And so I guess like maybe it would be useful to like people for me to go through our thought process for this video, which was that the video is the main product, right? Like the full video in the anamorphic landscape kind of presentation on YouTube. And so everything else is sort of like secondary to that. Yeah. But I think in any other scenario, that it's a way different conversation. Like if it's for a product or for a brand or for something like that, like it's a much more, you really have to have a really big reason to do it. Whereas with this, it was like the video is, we want the video to be as good as possible, and we think this is going to enable that. And I think it was the right call here. And we also didn't frame any shots that tight, so the anamorphic, like the vertical slices actually didn't turn out too bad for the most part. Sweet. So we are getting a good amount of stuff to share around everywhere. But yeah, it definitely, and like, I guess in my mind, maybe the other thing is just like the people that hate vertical video as a trend, whether it is a trend or whether it's here to stay. I guess you could kind of look as anamorphic as a bit of a rebellion against vertical video, because it's about as far as you can get from vertical video, and right?
I mean, it's meant to be viewed wide, right? Like it's that, I feel like is the only way to to consume anamorphic style shots is with that wide format. I'm thinking just like, you know, turning your phone and watching this video, like it would be an incredible viewing experience just on a phone with some of those flares. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. So,
that's tough having it. I like the rebellion aspect of it. Like if you want to rebel against that vertical video, this is the way to go. Start shooting anamorphic.
and I think there is probably people out there that do think that way. I don't know if I've met any.
Yeah.
I know there's one guy, you may or may not have seen it, depending on how much time you spend on the forums, who he is like a Panasonic guy, and he only shoots anamorphic as far as I know.
Okay.
And I'm like, I respect the hell out of it.
Zero time on the forums. Zero time on the forums.
I can't believe you even have time to talk to me, so I'm sure you don't have time to get be on these forums. Great, but yeah, anamorphic, it's a lot of fun. It is certainly a look it's very difficult to fully replicate by faking it.
Yeah, totally.
And I
mean,
think
even the filters that you can get, like the streaking filters, like that's still, it's different. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, you don't have that character with those filters. Like Freewell has some, you know, some great lens flare filters that you can pop in some of their ND filters and things like that, kind of stack them. But it's nothing like this. You know what I mean? It's not, you're not getting some of these quirks with with that type of thing. So,
but there is the argument to be made, you know, not to go too in the weeds on this, but like the anamorphic, like I think the place for fake anamorphic is in combination with a legit anamorphic lens. This video was almost the first anamorphic project I've done where I haven't faked a few shots with like a spherical lens. The exception here is that ending shot with the credits. I could not get wide enough on the 28 millimeter, so that's the Laowa 7.5 on the GH5S. Nice. So that's the one shot that's not a real anamorphic. But every other project, whether it's for a detail shot or a close up or like a crazy rack focus or something, you know. Or even just like, hey, we're doing a stunt. We need more than one camera. We only have one lens. You know, like having a few, you know, having a streak filter or like a bokeh insert or whatever, and sneaking that in about 15% of shots. Like even like Hollywood movies and John Wick is doing that kind of thing. You know, so if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. But
totally.
I think you need a lot of it to be on the real anamorphic, and then you can kind of sneak some of that stuff in. So.
Maybe that's a good way to shoot vertical anamorphic is just with those filters. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that again, at the end of the day, depends on what part of the experience like you care about or don't care about. You know,
100%.
So, although you know, and maybe that's the argument for the lesser stretch factors as well. Like if you're shooting, 4x3 with a 1.33. I think that just equals out to like 16:9 video, or pretty close. Yeah, and so that's not,
I'm not
that
good at math, but
I think I looked that up once, and I could be so wrong. Sorry, y'all, but
no, it sounds good to me.
It's not that wide, right? So you could get a little bit of that flare with like a 1.33 series lens or whatever, and not have the worst time in the world getting those vertical cutouts, but. There's a great video you and everybody should watch as well. I might send you a link. It's a guy who gets an anamorphic lens and then puts an anamorphic adapter on it, but vertical. So he like stretches it out and then like re-stretches it back. And it is such a weird look. Like it doesn't do what you think it would do.
I need a link.
I'll send it to you. It's something else, man. But, well, I think, is there anything else I guess you want to say about anamorphic or anything along those lines? And shout out your channel, all that stuff. I think we've exhausted our knowledge on anamorphic. I think there's people that may know more, but this is about as far as we go, I think.
No, this is great work on this video. I loved it. Loved the music video. I'm gonna go back and watch it again, you know, without the commentary, and just kind of like soak it all in. So great work on this. Love the shots. I love the anamorphic feel to it. So yeah, great work, man.
I appreciate it, and you know, you really know what you're doing, and so that praise means a lot. And yeah, thanks again for stopping by. Everybody should definitely check out Caleb's channel. Do you have any projects or any videos coming out, or anything you want to shout out other than just your socials in general?
I mean, no. Go check out the channel if you want. I mean, Instagram. I do a few things on Instagram. I'm over there. So, but other than that, yeah, I'm just doing a lot of corporate work out here. So yeah, I try to talk about Lumix as much as possible, and hopefully help you master your Lumix cameras is what the channel is all about.
Well, thanks again for coming on, man, and really like helping break down some of this stuff, talking about the state of Anamorphic, and you know, I hope we get to talk about something soon, and who knows, maybe we'll do a collab on your channel sometime. So anyway, thanks
Sounds
again,
good, man. Thanks
and,
for having me. Yeah,
yes.
Thanks for having me.
Take it easy.
All right. Yep.
And cut. Anyway, guys, thanks for stopping by watching this episode. Shout out to Caleb. Shout out to the team and the crew that helped this music video come to life. And definitely, like I said, check out the standalone video. Check out the music video. Subscribe to Caleb's channel. And thanks for stopping by, watching, subscribing. And if you did subscribe, I'll see you when I see you. I was looking at the screen the whole time, wasn't I? Oh well.